You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Ahrens and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens.
And I'm Jared Mounts.
So we're getting close to March, guys, and spring is finally sprung because it was like, -5, it felt like 3 weeks ago. And all of a sudden it's starting to feel like we're getting out of that winter lull.
Yeah, we're seeing 50s and 60s here in our area, and some of the ice that has formed on the different bodies of water is starting to subside, and guys and gals are starting to get the itch to get back out on the water.
Mm-hmm. And how many tournaments are you fishing this year? Who are you fishing with?
So Shenandoah Valley Bass, local organization, they have 10 dates or 10 tournaments on the schedule, and then also help with the Frederick County Bass team with the high school Bassmaster team. They've got 2 more qualifiers coming up here in the spring, and then the 4 qualifiers, they can qualify for the state tournament. So we'll be down at Smith Mountain Lake next for that. So coming up here in a couple weeks.
That is awesome. This year, I'm going to be actually fishing with his club as well. I'm going to try to make as many tournaments as I can, but I'm also fishing the full Northern Virginia Kayak Series this year. My first time ever fishing a kayak before. I've just done bass boats, so I thought like it would be really interesting to try something else. They're a really cool group of guys. I'm going to video it all and just to give you guys as much footage as possible. So that is going to be a lot of fun with everything else we have going on. Some housekeeping notes to kind of go over. Thank you guys so much who are actually subscribing and leaving reviews. Please keep leaving reviews on Apple and Spotify. It helps with the algorithms to help push this thing further so we can get more cool guests on. We are really thankful for all the nice comments. Please keep doing that because it does help the algorithm on YouTube as well. And I think, that's about it for that. And then we have a pretty cool guest, right?
Yeah. And I think, one thing I like the way you set this up, Thomas, it's Fishing the DMV. It's all things fishing.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about often, like there's a lot of different niches within the fishing industry and each to their own. And some people are just specific to that niche. Maybe a trout fisherman, maybe they're, fly fisherman versus a kayaker fishing maybe a river, boater fishing a bigger body water lake, pond fishermen. I mean, it just a full spectrum. And I think what I like about this podcast segment, it's all things fishing. Yeah. So, you're going to see a little bit of everything on here. And this guest we have coming in today, Nolan Miner, kind of fits that same bill as far. Hey, Nolan.
Hey.
Nolan is one of those all things fishing. Same thing. I remember catching up with Nolan or meeting him. He was a boat captain for his brother, Ewing Miner. We were fishing the James River, and they end up winning that tournament. I do a little bit of writing for Woods and Waters, and so we got a picture of them with their bag of winning fish, and wanting to interview them and talk to them. Caught up with Nolan, and I was just very impressed with Nolan's story and his willingness to share. As a young person, just kind of share what brought him success on the water, and just how he got to that point. So, Nolan, we're excited to have you on today, and maybe we'll start off with that kind of because you have some accolades as a high school angler that a lot of people can't speak to. So maybe talk up to your high school career fishing before and then up to.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today, guys. I'm always excited to jump on a podcast and talk about fishing, especially this time of year. Like you guys said, we're about out of it. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but yeah, good stuff. So yeah, growing up, I was always on the water doing something fishing, whether it didn't matter what it was really growing up for me. And that kind of led to competitive bass fishing in high school. I fished with Orange County High School, and you guys from Northern Virginia were always around. We fished similar tournaments. I'm sure I'd seen you and your crew in passing at tournaments, but it wasn't until that James River tournament that we met. But yeah, high school fishing was what really opened my eyes to competitive bass fishing, because I really didn't target bass until I want to say maybe my freshman or sophomore year in high school was when I, bought a bait caster, did something aside from fishing for smallmouth on the rivers. That was, the extent of my bass fishing growing up. And that led me to eventually fishing in college because I did well at the high school level. I think we won the state championship that is usually on Bugs Island. It may have been some, but for the most part, it's always on Bugs Island. Yeah, we won that, which took us to the national championship at Kentucky Lake, which is where that event has also been held for several years. And we got second place there. And that was like a big eye opener for me, realizing that I can compete. Because, right, you always, you don't really know how good you are. You can know that you're good, but you need some reassurance, and that was the reassurance that I needed to know that I should probably pursue it further. And yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of good success fishing tournaments, and I love fishing. Right, I'm not like strictly tournament guy. Like I like fishing for all kinds of stuff, but competing is really cool for me, and I'll always probably have some sort of drive to compete and fish competitively.
He's very humble. He's, he kind of, I think, we think we won the state. They won the state of Virginia champs. I mean, and then they go on to be second in the nation. There's quite a few that compete in that. And so that's quite an accomplishment. So that's pretty cool. So that through that experience, that takes you, then you end up going to West Virginia University. And from what I remember you saying, you weren't recruited, or you didn't necessarily go there to fish, but you end up on the fishing team. So just kind of talk about your experience there.
Yeah. So, in college fishing is, when I started, it was big, but now it's way bigger than it was. And high school fishing has kind of done the same thing. It's grown very rapidly. It's interesting because, like, when I can remember being in middle school, and like I didn't want people to know that I fished because that was like, kids would make fun of you, and there's people my age that would tell you the same thing. And then now, I mean, I'm sure it happens, but like kids in high school, like there's high school fishing teams. People know what it is, and it's not viewed in that same light anymore. It's not weird, like fishing is kind of cool now to some people. And that it was never like that when I was growing up. Even in high school, like people didn't really know what it was. And yeah, so at WVU, since we were a public university, there really wasn't much money for the fishing team. And we had a pretty small team. I didn't even know if I would fish in college. I just wanted to go there because I knew it was an option while I was there, and ended up, starting off fishing in an aluminum boat that my parents got for me. And I did well in that. And that's what led us to end up getting, a fiberglass boat. And that's what really opened the doors for me. But fishing at WVU, it was, a lot of people have the wrong idea of college fishing. They assume like if you go to a big school, there's like boats and stuff because they see these wraps that some universities have. But a lot of it requires a lot of work and financial support from. Usually, it comes from family. I mean, in my opinion, most of the college fishing that you see, there's some schools in the South that have a lot of funding that you'll see those bigger teams from, like. To name a few, Bethel is a big one. That's like a small private university. That's the places that really have a lot of money driven into their fishing teams. WVU was not that, but it still provided me, a platform to be able to fish in college and compete and do well. I did really well in college. Was usually in the runnings for the team of the year, and never cinched that one up. But I was close enough several times that I feel like that's a good accomplishment. Instead of winning it once, I was like almost there 3 times, which is really cool to do. And I almost won that the college classic, or the college classic bracket rather, where they send that one angler to the Bassmasters Classic, and that's the biggest thing in college fishing. That's like like the high school anglers, like that's kind of the peak. That's the top. That's what everybody looks for.
I'm sorry. Did you fish both the FLW version and the Bassmaster version of college, or did you guys just fish Bass? Okay.
Yeah, I did both. Every year until my last year when MLF got involved, I had always fished the FLW and the Bassmaster College Series. Bassmaster was always my favorite just because of how they ran their tournaments, and it was always a multi-day tournament, I love that format. I'm not huge on one-day tournaments. They're fun, but I think that multi-day tournaments really give good anglers a chance to set themselves apart. And yeah, so I fished a bunch of the FLW tournaments. All I know is that every year that I was eligible and that I fished it, like that I competed, I made the FLW and the college the Bassmaster College Championship. So there's 2 every year, one on the FLW side, which used to be FLW, now it's MLF, and then also Bassmaster. And so I think 3 years I made both. And then my 4th year, I didn't fish the MLF one because it was just, I wasn't a fan of how they were running things. And I sat that one out. And then I also, my 3rd year, I didn't actually fish the FLW championship because I wanted to fish a Bassmaster regular season event that was held on the same date. And to me, it seemed like a better opportunity for me to be at each of the Bassmaster ones, so I could hunt for that team of the year instead of going to a national championship for FLW. But yeah, they're both fun.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think people realize how close you're talking about that potential classic berth, how close you were. I mean, and if anybody gets a chance, go on, probably find on the Bassmaster Collegiate and watch the video. I mean, I'm pretty sure you were leading with like 15 minutes to go. Not to bring up, Nolan's probably like, thanks a lot for bringing up a sore subject, but I mean, to be in that position, and I think your opponent caught maybe a 3-pounder or something, like edgy out by maybe 6 ounces, I think it was. 4 ounces. 4 ounces. I mean,
4 ounces
to get a berth to the Bassmaster Classic Super Bowl fishing. I mean, what's going through your mind
just pour more
during that,
there.
after that, like, again, not to bring up a sore subject, but that in and of itself to me is huge. I mean, not everybody can say that.
Yeah, it was, it was a huge opportunity for me. I made so many great connections from that, just people, reaching out that, it opened a lot of doors for me. And so I'm thankful, even though I lost, and that obviously sucks really bad, because it would have been even more of an opportunity. It's still, I benefited a lot from that. And it was super cool just to get to fish that tournament. Everybody that fishes in college wants a chance to fish in it.
Right.
And just to be part of that was so cool. That was the first one that they did live. They did Bassmaster Live, and they did Bass Live all 4 days, which it has changed some in between then and now. I think that last year they did all days live, but sometimes it's not until the last day they do it. But we had super awesome coverage, and I got to meet all the people that you see doing Bassmaster Live, like what's happening. I guess it's still happening right now.
Yeah.
The series. It was those same guys, right? Like I got an email and it said like, "Hi, this is Tommy Sanders." I thought that was the coolest thing.
That is
cool.
awesome.
Oh my goodness.
And so just, it was so cool. Like, it does stink, but I don't look at it as a bad memory at all. That was awesome. And obviously it was not my time, right? Tournament fishing, if it's your time, you're gonna win. And I still got to fish some opens and prove that I can compete at that level, even though I didn't get to do it from that bracket tournament. That kind of felt good last year to fish some of those opens and do well, just so, because like everybody is all eyes on whoever wins that bracket tournament to see how they do in the open. It's like, okay, he did that, but can he compete really the highest level before the elites? So I did. So that was kind of like a nice, check that off, because I had always thought about it, like would I have been somebody that would win that tournament and then go on and struggle through the opens, but I did well. So
that's pretty cool. Before we leave the college, you're also a previous college angler at Shannon University, and anything else on that topic?
It's when you go there the first time, like when we did it in 2015 and 16 is a little different, where, I mean, I don't know if they had this with you, but you had to actually you had to finish in the top 10 in a regular event. Then you had to finish in the top 10 in a regional event just to then go to the Cup Championship or the Bassmaster Championship. And I just remember when you go to that, when you get to the big stage, just like the holy crap, we're here. This is a lot. This is a lot different than high school fishing. Like when you were in that moment, I mean, clearly you didn't shy away from it, and you were really able to come up to the plate and come out swinging. Did you mentally prepare anything differently? Your first time getting there, cameras on you. I mean, I know that scared the hell out of me the first night, and I threw up the night before we launched. Just like, this is like the legit. There are cameras and stuff here. It's crazy.
Yeah. No. So I definitely would get nervous before big events, especially like that one. That one was really crazy. The bracket was nuts, and having cameras everywhere. And at ours, because I mean, Bassmaster, obviously for good TV, they're gonna do whatever they can do to make good TV. So what they did in our tournament is you had two halves in your day. So you would fish the first half, and you're only fishing against one guy because it's the bracket. You have your first half, and then you come back to the dock, and they interview you side by side with that guy. So you say, "Okay, guys, this is what he has. This is what you have. What do you have to say, and what are you going to do in the next half?"
I just love that interview. Guy next to you, like, you got 20 pounds. Well, you suck today, dude. You got 3 for 2 pounds. What are you going to do about it? It's like, I don't know. Something different.
Yeah. I mean, that's, and yeah, so for sure, it's all kind of a nerve-wracking experience. There's a lot of pressure in tournament fishing. I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I can't help it. I get anxious during tournaments, and it's part of it. And I think it probably helps, even though it doesn't always feel like it helps. I've found a way to channel the energy and do something positive with it. But yeah, I mean, I've been able to compete under pressure. I'm good under pressure, but me personally, like, I don't like it. Like, it doesn't feel good in that moment. I've been able to do well under pressure, but yeah, no, it gets to me. And as far as mentally, like, preparing or how to overcome that, the biggest thing for me, I would probably say, just you have to be positive even when things are not good, because you see the guys that do well consistently at the highest level usually are not the ones that ever have a negative attitude. Like, when something bad happens, they usually try to get past it, or at least not think about it. Don't let it take control of your whole day, because that's in all sports. I don't understand how it happens as much in some other sports, because you would think, like, athletes that just train to do a very specific thing, and that's all they do is train for that 1 hour game or whatever. And then it comes down to it, like, it's really just whatever is in everybody's heads, right? Because you see it all the time. A team that's great can get beat by a team that's not that good, and it's all mental. And fishing is the same way, probably more so, in my opinion, because we're not competing for an hour. That's not how fishing works. You got to be, you got to stay at that mentally sound level for 10 hours sometimes. So,
well, that's good. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't think enough is talked about the mental side of this and the psychology behind it. I know in baseball, like, that was a big thing. If as a hitter you're hitting 300, that means you're failing 7 out of 10 times, and you're still considered successful. So to your point, how are you handling that adversity or the negative or whatever psychologically? How are you handling that? How do you overcome that? And I was thinking too, it's also when you talked about knowing where you stand with your opposition, how you fish when you have a lead versus trying to from behind, catching up. I mean, they both come from different angles, but you can tell you have the right attitude and right mentality. You have the right approach to it. Whereas a lot of people will spiral out, when they first sign of adversity. You're able to kind of stay on the right level playing field.
And something I want to add that's going to meld perfectly with your question is, all I did from when I fished high school Bassmasters, where at least when we did it, the person in the boat with you was a different age bracket, so you're not competing against them. And then everything else was just team all the way through into college, team. What is the pros and cons, like, when you fish in college and it's really a team aspect and strategy, and then you do the opens, and then you get in the big boy world where you don't have a teammate anymore? Did you feel like there was a learning curve? And do you think there's another type of mental, I almost think it's harder 100% to fish by yourself than with a team, believe it or not. And I know, like, you can have a partner that spins you out, but at least you have somebody to, like, fall back on to help. Like, what are the mental hurdles you go through fishing as a team compared to, you fish the opens, it's all you? Like, what are the differences, pros and cons of that?
So for me in college, and I think it's like this with a lot of teams, that you'll have a duo where one guy, is operating the boat, and usually he's on the trolling motor and calling the shots. And so that was kind of how it always was in college for me. My partner was great. He caught a lot of fish, great fisherman. But for the most part, I was, kind of in charge of what the plan was for the day. And the main thing that it taught me is how many fish I sometimes overlook, because partners sometimes will catch fish that it doesn't even seem possible how, you just fished over that fish, or they were doing something a little bit different. And then, but the cool thing in the college series is that you have that other guy there, right? So you can be doing something and he can be doing something different. And you can accomplish, both things. Like one guy is power fishing, the other guy's finesse fishing. Doesn't matter who catches the fish. They all go to the same place. Whereas when you go to the opens, you're like, all right, am I doing something wrong right now? If I had somebody else in the boat, would they be successful doing, something else? And that to me was the biggest difference, was just knowing that I got to catch them all. I can't just get around them, because in college I mostly just had to find them, right? And sometimes I would catch them all. Sometimes my partner would do a lot of the heavy lifting. Sometimes it would be 50-50. But in the opens, you don't have that luxury. You got to do it all yourself.
It's like a safety net almost when you have a partner, especially a good partner, which I think you really need. You don't get to that level with a dude that just throws a Senko behind the boat and just drags the damn thing all day. Like you need a good partner that has something to help you out. And that really hurt me the first year that at least I started to fish by myself. It's like, oh crap. Like you just said, it's like you can't just get around them, because now we're not just throwing two baits at the same time. They're different. You have to really, that learning curve of being able to figure it out, that's really what I think separates it. And then if you didn't have anything else with the college thing, I want to kind of segue to his open.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good segue. Go into the open. You leave college and now you go into the opens last year. And so, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So last year I fished the Northern Opens, which is 3 events. First one was on the James River, which was really cool because that was honestly the first big tournament I had ever fished close to home. And it was a Bassmaster Open. I live, an hour and a half from the boat ramp. That was wild because I've always in college, sometimes I'm driving 12 hours, 18 hours to get to some of these events. And then my first big time tournament that's not a college event is right by home. That was really neat. Then we went to Oneida Lake in New York, and then we went to the St. Lawrence River. And the cool thing about the college series was that I had a lot of experience on the St. Lawrence River because of that. We went up there and spent a week fishing in a tournament, and then because of that, I went back and did it for fun. So it was cool to be able to fish big events and kind of be familiar with some of the playing field.
Apologies, but like back up a little bit to like, how did it work out that you fished the opens last year? Just for the people at home, like listening in.
How did I end up fishing the opens?
Yeah. Like what's the build up to this story of like you fishing these 3 tournaments?
Yeah. So in college I did well. And if you look at the Elite Series now, a lot, if not, by far the majority of young fishermen, the new Elite Series members are people that fished in college and had a really good track record in college. And so, obviously I felt like I kind of fit into that category that I should give it a try. Because right now is the time when I'm young enough and I have the freedom to do something like fish the opens, right? It's not something easy to be able to, the money's one thing, the time is another. And I certainly have time right now. If the other stuff is a little harder to come by, but I had the time to do it, and I made it work. Financially, got some help. Obviously family members, some from sponsors, and it was because I wanted to, see, how I stack up against the opens field, and the opens are pretty unbelievable to try to fish in, because you show up and basically you're going to go to a fishery where you have people that are fishing the opens and have been fishing them for a while. So they have history on these fisheries, usually at the same time of year, because a lot of times, whether there was 2 years in between, they didn't visit this place, right? The Northern Opens, generally it hits the same fisheries. It changes a little year to year, but there's guys that are really good at fishing the opens that have been fishing these places and have history at the time of year. A lot of them will practice for like 2 weeks or longer. Like they just live at the lake for 2 weeks. These guys have, various situations in life, whether they own a business, whether they're retired, different stories on how everybody gets it. But there's enough people out there that somehow, people have it lined up to where they can just go fish somewhere for that long. So you have those guys. Then you have like literally the Elite Series, like Mike Iaconelli, Brandon Polinick. There were more. Jacob Porosnik was fishing last year. Tons of big names. And then also you have people that have nothing to do with the opens. They're just the best locals that are like, I think I could beat Mike Iaconelli on my river. So that's pretty much, those are and so it's like, So now there's a couple of us young guys trying to weasel our way in here. Like, how much room is left to compete? You know, how many trucks are going to be left at the end of the day when you put all of those people? Because that's what the field looks like. That's who you're competing against. Like, nobody. There's very few people that are fishing the opens that are not stiff competition.
I tell you, that's still amazing though that you can even do that. There's no other sport. You can't jump in a NASCAR and run with the big guys right now. You can't, basketball court, any sport, football. This is the only sport that you can, to your point, go in and literally compete against the best of the best, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. I mean, it's something like I do wish, like, over time they would make a better evolution of the bridge gap between fishing college to, if you're in the bass side of things, it's, the opens. Like, that's the one thing I think FLW did do well back in the day, having BFLs in the coastas. Then you had a better, I think, feeder system that hopefully someday, bass can also emulate too. Because you're right, it is hard. You go from college to facing, Roger Clemens, your first at bat. I mean, it's a hell of a learning curve you have to go through. But yet, then walk us through it though. Like, so James River, your first tournament actually on the opens.
Yeah. The James River was pretty wild for me. Just the experience, like the nerves. Each practice day, when I get up in the morning, it felt like a tournament. Like I had tournament nerves in practice, which was really weird for me. Still did my standard practice and, trying to find fish, figure out what I'm going to do for the tournament. And the tournament, it went okay. I ended up getting one of the last checks, so it could have gone better, but and for me, it was like, usually what happens in a tournament is I either have, a decent practice and then it ends up working. And to me, that's like the most successful tournament is usually a good practice and then a good tournament. There's some where it's like I have a good plan from practice and then it kind of falls apart, which happens. That's just part of fishing. Sometimes your practice is misleading or the fish change, but usually I can recover from that. And that's kind of what happened at the James. Was like I had a good practice and then things changed, but I recovered. So to me, it was not, I didn't crush it or anything like that. And I still got a check. So I was super happy with that. And it's funny, one of the places I fished. So the second day, I fished a spot that when Jared and I met, that was where my brother caught fish to win that tournament. He caught him out of that same spot, a little creek. And I knew the reason that I fished it was because I knew that because of the tides, it was physically impossible for anyone to have fished it until the day that I went in there because the tide wasn't high enough for people to even access it during tournament hours. And that's that local, like being, close to the James. And that was really weird. Another weird thing I've never done in a tournament, like, cause I didn't fish there in practice, obviously. It was like, I've never been at a big tournament where I've been like, oh, like, let me go slide into this little spot where me and my brother caught him 2 years ago. Like that was never something that I ever had in college. It was always, very new learning experiences at each fishery. Yeah, so getting a check at that tournament obviously made my season a lot easier. Not that it's easy financially, but like I needed to be cashing checks to make my season work. I got a check there. And then the next one was Oneida. And I generally have had great experiences up north. I didn't really think that tough fishing happened that much up north. It does. It does. Oneida it's like top 3 toughest tournaments I've ever fished as far as like,
wow,
it's a good fishery, but the fishing is just that bad right now because of whatever circumstances are taking place. It's weird because like up north, things are pretty stable. Like you don't really get floods. It's the summertime. There's not cold fronts that are coming through, changing anything. And Oneida was just bad. It was really bad. I ended up getting a check and got the second to last. I can't remember. I got, about the same as the James. I may have even finished a little higher, but somewhere in the upper 30s, I think. Got the last check there, and I had 7 keepers in 2 days.
Damn.
So that's the opens field, right? That's like, everybody's pretty good, and I got paid.
That's gotta make you feel good, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah, that one was so weird. And again, that was one of those tournaments where I felt like I didn't have anything good going and just made the most of it and survived. And because like on day one, so I had problems with my trolling motor battery charger in that tournament. And so the first day at like 11:30, maybe noon, I realized that I didn't have much trolling motor battery. And, you know, I already had 2 of my fish because I only caught 3 that first day. Yeah, I caught 3 the first day. And so basically, I kind of, you know, hobbled around the remainder of the day. So I could have been fishing more effectively, but honestly, like between my horrible practice and how horrible the lake was fishing for everybody, I didn't really feel like that killed me. And I went home and thought I fixed the problem. Turns out I didn't. So I put my boat in the second day, and I go to troll from like the boat has just slid off the trailer, and I try to troll to the dock, and I can't. That's how dead my battery was. Because the battery charger was telling me that it was charging, and it said that everything charged. And, you know, evidently that was obviously not the case. And my co-angler, he had a boat there with an extra battery. And so like we like messed around at the service trailer. Those guys were like, yeah, you got, you know, one of your batteries is completely dead. Like it's a bad battery, yada, yada. They're like, you need to go to Walmart and get a new battery. I'm like they're blasting off right now. Like I need, you know, I don't. So that's, that was the worst equipment problem I've ever had at a tournament. But we ended up taking one of his batteries from his boat and replaced the battery that was the most dead out of my 3. And I had a little bit of trolling motor juice. And I was like, all right, well, I got a spot right by the boat ramp that I caught one at yesterday. So we're just going to go there and see what we can do. And we ended up in like the first hour and a half, 2 hours, we caught 4 nice smallmouth at that spot right by the boat ramp. And sometimes misfortune helps you in tournaments. Probably one of the scenarios. So that's why, you know, that positive mental attitude thing, you got to just, you know, you never know how the day is going to pan out. But anyway, so we caught those. And then by like 11, I was like, my trolling motor was dead. And it was also both these days, the wind was ripping on Oneida. On Oneida, there's nowhere to hide. There's no creeks to duck into. There's some, but it's not a creek that can support any number of boats. Like there's not coves. It's a bowl. So when that wind is blowing down that lake, there's nowhere to hide, especially when you don't have a trolling motor. So I called the tournament director and I'm like, hey, I have an anchor for a kayak in the bed of my truck. I'm right by the ramp. Can I go get it? He's like, yeah, sure. So I ended up tying a kayak anchor to my cleat, and I would just drift with that thing hanging out, dragging behind the boat.
That's smart.
I caught a 4-pounder, which ended up getting me paid while doing that in the last time.
Oh, my goodness, dude.
So like I got a check from that mess, right? So I don't know how, but that's
your ability to stay calm though through that thing without. I would be punching somebody or the boat. That whole time that would go down.
Yeah, and talk to that a little bit because I know of you talking to you, and then you mentioned it today too. You seem to do a very good job of making adjustments, and that's hard for some people to know when to make that adjustment or what are you paying attention to? Because I know too, like I'm certain you like pay attention to certain things. You see something, and that triggers a change in your mind. So how do you break that down mentally as far as adjustments go?
Yeah, for me, it's, I think just time on the water. Since I'm always fishing, decisions are a lot more natural for me. I feel like it comes to me naturally when I have to, you know, make weird calls on the water, because I try to something in between college and like once I started to get further into my tournament fishing career, I started to realize like, hey, I need to start treating this less like a tournament day and more like a fun fishing day a lot of the time, because when something's not working and you're fishing for fun, you don't keep trying to make it work. You're like, all right, well, we're, you know, like, oh, the wind's blowing, like, let's go throw a spinnerbait. We might catch them. Whereas in a tournament, you might be too scared to do that because you're like, well, this is how I have been catching them. I need to keep
that is really good advice.
Fishing, and that's when I do the best. You know, sometimes you just have to trust your instincts and be flexible.
That's cool.
So that's something that for me is really important. You know, sometimes I have to catch myself and go like, well, like if you were out here fishing for fun and you'd been doing this for 2 hours and hadn't caught anything, you wouldn't keep doing it. You wouldn't be like, oh, maybe it's going to turn on in 2 hours. No, you go do something else. Usually that's how it works for me.
That's crazy.
That's great
Like,
advice.
literally,
Yes.
so I think it was 2 years ago, Brandon Polnick went on Sandy Cooper, and he talked about that, where everyone's punching grass, and he had nothing. And he's like, I don't know, there's a tree over there, let me throw a shaky head. Boom, he catches like an 8-pounder. It's like that idea of just having fun, and no matter what the situation is, like going back to your roots of like, it's so weird because you do get in tournaments and you get so stressed out, you forget how to cast. And if you would relax and be like, yeah, I know what to do, let's just go fish. It's about the fish. You know, you're going to have success. You'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, they are just bass at the end of the day.
We give them way too much respect. We really do. Did you want to talk about the kayaking now?
Yeah. So then this year you're going to focus a little more on the kayak circuit, and you just dropped a video on Toledo Bend on the Hobie series. So talk a little bit about what you have planned for now.
Yeah, it's funny. You just mentioned that you're also doing kayak stuff for the first time this year.
Yes.
You've mostly done boat stuff. So me growing up and throughout college, I fished in a kayak a lot.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah, tons. I had a 12-foot kayak that I would take all kinds of places, and I feel like I learned probably equally as much doing that as I did fishing from a bass boat, just because it's a much more intimate fishing experience. You really experience what's happening, and you get to see a lot of things up close that you wouldn't normally in a bass boat. So yeah, jumping into kayak tournaments wasn't a huge transition for me. People kind of think it is because they're like, oh, you've always fished college series in the opens, oh, it's funny. All the kayak guys were like, oh, it's a big change, like all the guys, like when I was going to fish this first one. And they didn't realize I've probably fished more in a kayak than I have in a bass boat. Because, in college, I had some money to throw in the gas tank for the boat, but kayak doesn't take gas.
And it's the money part of it. It's competitive now. And then, like, correct me if I'm wrong there. Going from bass fishing, like on a boat and doing all that stuff, it's the idea that you need, and I could be wrong, so correct me here, you need to maximize your spot. You don't get to haul ass with a 250 to the other end of the lake like that. So you need to really think about where you start and really plan your day out. I think more where I feel like when you have a boat, it gets you into this false sense of security of, well, I can just blast down the lake real quick. I can hit, 30 points. Where in a kayak, because even though you can get an outboard, you can get an electric motor or what have you, you still have to be you have to really milk every spot that you have. Am I on board? You're right around there?
Yeah, no, that's completely true. And it's really cool for me because my style of fishing is pretty much like when I'm in a bass boat, I don't want to have 2 spots that I think are good. I want to have, maybe 10 spots I've caught them off of, and there's 15 more that are similar that I haven't even fished. And I want to fish them all. I want to, fish productive water and cycle through it. That was always how I fished and did the best fishing bass tournaments from a boat. And so going to the kayak stuff, you have to have a completely different mindset. And you really have to, catch what's there. Like when you are in the area, you got to figure out, so like in a bass tournament, there may be a creek and I'm focusing on the back third of the creek, catching them on a buzzbait. And then I do it once and just go to the next one, Whereas in a kayak, you're like, all right, I caught those buzzbait fish that are in the back third. Now I got to figure out what are the fish doing at the mouth of the creek. I got to learn how to catch those too and do it all in the same day.
Because like I haven't fished a single tournament yet, but based on me getting ready last year for it, I'm shocked. Like, oh my God, there's more fish in these areas than I give them credit for. Because when I was with the boat, like you said, like I would hit those buzzbait fish, boom, I'm on to the next one. And now it's like I'm actually feeling like I'm becoming a better angler fishing from a kayak, because you realize like there's a lot more than those like 6 fish there in that creek.
Yeah, fishing it. So this first event we just fished at Toledo Bend, that was a really big eye opener for me. Just because I've fished 2 tournaments there at the exact same time of year from a bass boat. So I had history and I was like, all right, I got these areas that I already know, just going to go fish that. Well, that didn't work. They were further along than they were in the past. But, there were places that I would not expect to catch as many fish from them as I did. And also the amount of time that I could spend in an area and like catch a fish and then catch a fish there 30 minutes later. There were just places that would happen that in a bass boat, I just wouldn't ever think to do that. And yeah, it was a really, really neat experience for me, especially being on a big fishery. Because for me, kayak fishing was always small water, places without boat ramps that, you know, don't get fished much. That was what was always cool about kayak fishing to me. But now we're fishing on the same huge fisheries that bass tournaments are on, and I always kind of didn't like the idea of that when I was fishing in a bass boat, because to me, like in a bass boat, I would cover so much water to catch what I caught. There's no way, you know, I just couldn't process how I could potentially sit in one place, pick one place to stay for the most part, maybe move once or twice, but and needed to, you know, figure out how to do that. But after this first tournament, you know, it was a huge eye opener for me. We do have forward sonar on our kayaks, my brother and I do, which helps me a lot. Because I could, you know, I'm a very visual fisherman, and so to see that fish are around is helpful. But like at this tournament at Toledo Bend, it was amazing to see in an area where you're staying how the activity of those fish changes throughout the day. So there may be 2 hours where the fish, you can see them, they don't even look at your bait, and you're like, those are probably bass. And then all of a sudden there's 30 minutes where it's like you can't keep your bait away from them. And it happens if you've watched Bass Live, the Elite Series and whatever, bite windows happen across the whole lake. We don't know how the fish communicate that or what causes it. There's stuff that's you know, outside our understanding, but it's the same way. And a kayak just really was an eye-opener for that, because if you're always fishing, because for the most part in a kayak you're going to spend more time fishing than moving, and yeah, it was like, so I can communicate with my little brother during the tournament. We're allowed to do that, so it's crazy. It would be like all of a sudden I catch a big one, I call my brother to let him know, and he's like, yeah, I just caught a big one, and we're
that's so cool.
That's wild. That's cool.
And so in a bass boat, I'm like, I got to move to where the fish are biting, but really it might just be that I just have to be fishing when they are biting, and it doesn't actually matter as much about the location as I thought.
That's another great point.
Yeah, I got into kayak tournaments because of the financial side of it. I'm fishing in a Hobie, which is still super expensive, but compared to what the bass boat side of things is going to these days,
a small house,
and it's blowing my mind really. And there's good money to be had in the kayak side of things if you're consistent, and I feel like I can be. But I mean, for instance, at this Toledo Bend tournament, they pay the top 20. Entry fee is $260, and they pay $10,000 first place. There's no bass boat tournament that you're going to find that. And also at a bass boat tournament, like, you're putting gas in your boat every day. Your boat is not the same price as a kayak, you know? And there's, so the financial side of things is really cool. And again, like, there's very few people that are actually making money fishing tournaments. And so, I mean, it's just a way for it to cost less, and you know, potentially have a better shot at breaking even, to me. And with the way that the market is looking for bass boats and for trucks, I feel like we will probably see kayak fishing become a lot more popular in the coming years, especially just because of how advanced the technology is becoming with kayaks, and people are probably having that realization, like, hey, I don't have to spend $100,000 on a bass boat, or like for most people, I can't spend $100,000 on a bass boat.
That's
and I don't know, and it's refreshing, the accessibility to all fishermen, because there's a lot of good fishermen out there that will never be able to fish the opens for a number of reasons, but financially is a huge reason for that. And I think it's really neat to have that door kind of open, to have a, you know, somewhere that people can really be competitive and it's not unattainable.
Yeah, and hopefully kayak fishing learns a lesson from bass and these other organizations where you got to make sure it stays within control. Like, it shouldn't be to the point where you have 56 graphs and it costs $100,000 just for equipment to get started. And don't get me wrong, like, some of the kayaks too are legit, but like, at what point is like, that's a John boat. You have a 20, you know, you have a 20 horsepower on the back of that thing. Is this still a kayak? But I mean, it's still really cool. And talk to us about your rig. Like, what is your setup for your Hobie? Are you running a 12 or a 14 or?
Yeah, I have a Pro Angler 12, and like, I don't know a whole lot about the kayak stuff yet because my little brother did it last year and he was really successful. And that is what piqued my interest because I talked to him about it. He's like, this is a good idea. I think we could be really successful. And so it's his kayak. I bought it from him, and he has a new one this year. So yeah, it's a Pro Angler 12. It has the 360 drive, which is crazy. That's a big reason for me, having previously been kind of opposed to fishing from kayaks on bigger fisheries, is because unless there's very little wind, it's pretty challenging to fish. But with that 360 drive, it's like having a trolling motor. I mean, you have to rotate the positioning of the drive a little bit, but you can make such little movements and just control it's unbelievable. It's like having a trolling motor in a bass boat, is what it felt like to me. I mean, the fact that in the wind I was able to use forward sonar and catch fish on a jerkbait from a kayak, that should be a testament to how controllable you
have the prop drive. Do you have the Torpedo or the motor guide version trolling motor thing yet, or is it just the forward facing sonar?
I just have forward sonar. So besides that, everything on the kayak I guess is like stock, what comes with the kayak. I don't have a trolling motor. My brother does, and in those Hobie tournaments you're only allowed to use a trolling motor in practice, which I really like. In competition, you can't use any sort of motor, which is really cool to me because I think that's a very neat place. You're talking about where do we draw the line? That's a great place to draw it, in my opinion.
Yeah, because like I know I watch some of these pros that they do have like a Torpedo on the back of it, which is neat. I'm not going to say that's not a cool adjustment, but then it's like you open the floodgate to where does it end, where you can have a 20 horse electric on the back and just rip past people. At what size graph are you running on your boat? And do you have it like stationed center of the kayak, or do you have it off to the side? And do you have like a GPS puck? Like, walk us through that.
It's a 9-inch Garmin, just their live scope bundle, so it's side imaging, GPS, down imaging, the standard package with that. And for me it's mostly about that forward sonar, because whether we like it or not, that's what competitive fishing is becoming. And it's not, certainly it's not every tournament that you're able to utilize that, but if you follow competitive fishing, you should know that you got to learn it if you want to stay competitive. And like I said earlier, I'm a very visual fisherman. My favorite form of fishing is where I'm able to see fish up shallow, not necessarily sight fishing, but just like be looking at visual targets that I'm casting at, maybe being able to see my bait as I'm fishing it. To me, that's where I feel the most confident and most successful. Well, now with live scope, you can do that in deep water. And I've always struggled out deep because I can't. It is very hard for me to process it all. I've had decent tournaments where I've fished a lot of deep water, but before the forward sonar, it just felt all very foreign to me out there. And it's not hard to use. It's expensive, but it's really easy to figure out. Like, to me, I've used all kinds of electronics. Forward sonar is by far the easiest one to interpret, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm getting it put on my boat if we can ever get the supply chains back on. They say it's still coming, but I guess my fear is like I will spend 9 hours chasing blots, and that's something I would like to ask you about the forward facing. Like, when do you not use it, in the sense of you see them down there, but it's almost like you got a 6-pounder on the bed. When do you tell yourself that voice, like, you got to leave it alone now? You got to go somewhere else. Like, how do you tell yourself, like, even though you're always seeing fish, like, nope, got to move. Nope, this ain't going to work.
Yeah. So before I had it and I was just observing fishermen that used it in tournaments and whatnot, I kind of thought to myself, and discussing with other people, I think the main thing about being able to utilize forward sonar and be successful with it is learn when to ignore it. Like what you're talking about. There's times when you need to really rely on it. There's times when you're going to use it some, and then there's times when you probably just got to forget about it. And figuring out how to make that decision is probably going to be, a really big asset as a tournament fisherman in the future. And I'm still trying to learn that. So Toledo Bend, it's wintertime for the most part, pre-spawn, the fish aren't really on the bank for the most part. And it's a timber lake. To me, that's no brainer forward sonar. There's so many fish that live out in those trees that previously we weren't really able to fish for, right? If there's a fish that's in 20 feet of water and there's 2 of them and they're sitting 10 feet down on a tree, you can't fish for those fish because there's 100 other trees that don't have bass on them. There's no way to target those fish before forward sonar, in my opinion, unless you're a local and you just know that's a good tree for some reason. But then at the same time, there's other tournaments where it's like, okay, there's fish out there, but the better fish are on the bank that I need to be fishing for, or these fish are sitting somewhere where I'm not able to see them on forward sonar. Because there are fish that can be so tight to whatever they're sitting on, whether it's a brush pile, rocks, just the bottom, they can sit so low that you can't see them. So at Toledo Bend, I had a spot that I was catching fish off of, and I can see where I can watch my bait drop to the bottom, and it's a flat bottom, and I'm catching fish there, and I cannot see them throughout the whole time. And I caught 4 or 5 off of it. And it was like 6 or 7 feet deep. And when they're shallow, you can see them very easily if they're up off the bottom with that thing. So
do you have this is going to kill me, perspective mode, I think it is.
I haven't used that. Okay. I haven't used that. I've heard mixed reviews about it, but a lot of people have said it's not crucial. I don't know.
In the last
do what?
No, I was gonna say in the last thing, hook set. So asking for a friend, how do you set the hook on a jig without throwing yourself out of the kayak? He did this 3 times. He never learned apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, kayak fishing is definitely different, and since I did it so much, I guess it's not as big of an adjustment for me. When I started kayak fishing, I was in a 10-foot fit-in, the very standard. Everybody has probably been in one at some point, probably the first kayak they were in, but I fished in that thing for years. I mean, I still was fishing in that thing in college, and so I was accustomed to balancing in that, standing up and fishing in that. So since I've gone up from that, it's a breeze to me.
Gotcha.
I've never really had issues with what you're describing.
It might have been a freak accident. Who knows? Or you just
well, one thing with kayak fishing is sometimes you gotta make yourself realize that even if I get the bite, if it's behind me or at a weird angle, I'm better off to not get that bite, even though like maybe I'm drifting up on this spot and I'm going to spook the fish if I don't make this cast now. There's times when you got to realize that's just not going to pan out. I'm better off to try to reposition to where that fish is where I need it to be if I do get that bite. Because one time I was going to flip the kayak, but I opted to jump out when things got hectic. But basically I was drifting into a canal, and I made a flip. And then for some reason I looked behind me and I saw a spot that was really neat that I felt like I needed to skip a jig into. And so I skipped kind of quartering behind me, and I get a bite, and I was standing. And when I set the hook, I just, it was not a good scenario to try to do that from. And yeah, so a lot of times you just got to be mindful of where you're fishing and, where that's going to end up putting you when you set the hook. Hook sets are different in a kayak because your boat moves towards the fish when you set the hook. So
yes,
like a lot of times, I know in the bigger kayak, in the Hobie, it doesn't seem to be as big of a factor, but in the really small kayaks, I would even have to use different rods. Like for a chatterbait, I would have to use something that a much faster action, because the boat moves so much that like a softer rod like you would normally use for a bladed jig would give too much to the fish, and you would end up losing them. You wouldn't hook them well enough. So I would use a fast action rod, which I would never do. And that's stuff that you really got to just spend a lot of time on the water catching fish and tweak and experiment. But yeah, I mean, and if you're flipping a jig, you got to set it harder, which seems crazy, but you do, because your boat moves towards the fish. And so that, you lose some power with that.
Could you talk, and this is like to the people that are listening or watching at home, honestly, the importance of, if you want to get, and this is just my belief, is if you're going to get into kayak fishing, don't just go for a Dick's Sporting Goods version, because what really helped me is when I actually put a little bit more money and got comfortable, and it gave me the ability to have more boat control. I remember I went with my wife a couple years ago. We went red fishing, and we got some cheap kayaks and we're doing it, and we couldn't get anything done because when you set the hook on those suckers, you're just being towed. You had no leverage. When I finally got a pedal drive kayak, all of a sudden it's a game changer where you can set the hook and you have the ability to put your boat in reverse or being able to move and have that control with the fish. Just talk to a little bit about like the difference having a pedal drive system of any brand, I guess, but specifically Hobie does.
Yeah. The Hobie, I mean, that's so to me, like when I talk about the opens and how rigs, bass boats are just so out of control expensive now, because to get all the bells and whistles, I mean, it's unbelievable how much money you're spending. What's cool at the kayak level is, a Hobie with bells and whistles on it, right? That's pretty much the top of the line. That's the equivalent of like $120,000 bass boat, and it's attainable for me, right? And much more attainable compared to the bass boat side of things. And so, yeah, a Hobie, it just offers a lot more control, maneuverability. Other pedal drives are great too. The ones with the props, the grass affects them a lot more, but also like you're spending thousands less to get one. So that, sometimes that's a great option too. The main thing that I think the pedal drives offer is the ability to cover more distance without getting as tired, because you better be in really good shape if you're going to, be paddling miles without a pedal drive. I do think, though, there's definitely still time and place for kayaks that don't have pedal drives. I have a 12-foot, it's a Perception Pescador is what it's called. I think it's like a $750, $800 kayak, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty cheap for kayaks. And that thing, I love it still. Like I'll still fish in that. There's probably going to be Hobie BOS tournaments that I take that to, for specific scenarios, obviously. But so yeah, I mean, it depends on where you're going to be fishing, I guess, more than anything. But the pedal drives, if you're going to be fishing on lakes and fisheries that bass boats fish on, typically pedal drive is probably a good option. But if you can't afford that, certainly any to me, like a fishing kayak is a 12-foot sit on top. That's like the base, but that's a great base. A 12-foot sit on top kayak that is not pedal drive is a great fishing kayak in my opinion. Again, that's usually you're better off in that in smaller water. You can't fish in much wind, but it does a very good job under the right circumstances.
Good stuff.
So switching gears again, 2 or 3 years ago, I was down in Outer Banks with the family, and we're out on Jeanette's Pier, and we're fishing, and I turn around, and here's Nolan Miner coming off the pier with a cooler full of Spanish mackerel, and I'm talking cooler full. Was it James Graves with you?
Yeah, James was there. Yeah.
And it was funny because they were like down there they were getting ready to go the next day offshore on a fishing trip. And they said the day before or earlier that day, they went kind of inshore, like intercoastal area. And I said, "Oh, do you all have a boat?" He said, "No, we waited." And I thought, man, these guys are like diehard. Like seriously, I mean, it was pretty cool. But with that said, again, one other thing I respect about you, it truly is all things fishing. So, you're up north in Erie catching cutthroat, you're offshore, you're inshore. Like there's no limitation to your fishing, cobia fishing, so what of all the different types of, let's say, fun fishing, what is kind of your favorite experience or favorite thing to do? Or there may not be a favorite. You like doing them all.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I do one specific thing, no matter how great the fishing is, if I do it too many times in a row, I'll get, tired of it. And so I like to change things up all the time. And usually I like to just be able to fish for something that is the best at that time. Like I want to be fishing for that fish at the best time to fish for that fish. So I'm not going to, like for right now, I know I could go out and catch a largemouth in 40-degree water if I let a jerkbait sit there for 15 seconds, but I don't want to do that. I'm going to go fish for a walleye that's biting right now or a trout that's biting right now. So I like to kind of let the seasons dictate what I'm doing.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, I don't really draw draw the line anywhere. Like there's, I'm not really above anything when it comes to fishing. I'll
That's
do
pretty
it.
cool.
I love it. Well, do I
But
want to beat my
if
head
I had to
against the
pick a
wall?
favorite, and this is one it's hard for this situation to line up, but I've caught some tunas on poppers.
Oh
And
my
that is
God.
that's the peak. That's like, I
Wow.
don't know that it gets better. Like there's a lot of different, like people like marlin and there's all kinds of stuff to do offshore. But if I get to cast a popper at a yellowfin, I'm good. Like that's it. I would have to do that a lot before I get tired of it.
Yeah, that's cool.
God, that sounds like fun. Have you ever taken a kayak out yet, like to do the saltwater thing with it yet?
I've fished a lot inshore. I've caught a lot of redfish, trout, flounder, and sheephead from a kayak. Besides that, I went in the ocean once and we caught some bluefish, and that was really cool just to be in the ocean on a kayak. Obviously, you need very specific circumstances to do that. We weren't very far from the beach, but I don't really like the idea of, like, some people actually try to mothership a kayak out to places where fish that are not accessible to kayaks live, just for the principle of catching it out of a kayak. That's not me. That's not really, because I like being like, one thing that I'll always come back to with fishing is I want to be as effective as possible. There's certain things where I'm like, no, that's like, so I don't really want to bass fish with live bait, right? Because that's weird. I'll still do it some, but for the most part, like, but besides that, I don't really have many lines drawn. I just want to be effective. That's like, so I don't really fly fish. There's and I did growing up. I fly fished a lot. I feel like I'm a decent fly fisherman. This might upset some people, me saying this, but like, for the most part, catching a fish on a fly rod is because, like, you want to catch it on a fly rod. It's not because I want to be the most effective that I can be. And so for me, that's really hard because I just want to catch a lot of fish and I want to be effective. So I know say, okay, I might catch 7 trout on a fly rod, but I'm going to catch 10 with a spinning rod. For me, that's what I want to do. So,
and I want to say too, like, if you're not following Nolan Miner on Instagram and YouTube, you need to. And I absolutely love his YouTube channel and the way that you break down from the collegiate to even this kayak. Like, you have your really good footage of you fishing, and you're talking through that, but then the way you edit that and you kind of talk over it and you have no problem explaining why you're fishing this area or what was a decision process to move this area and all those things. I just think it's a really good learning experience to kind of just gain insight and knowledge, whether it was good or bad. You're kind of walking through that and talking through that. And I think it's just a great way to learn. So I would just encourage people to like and share your pages and just follow you on your YouTube, because I think you do a really good job at it. Yeah, and I got 2 more points that I want to kind of talk about, which is, first is your YouTube channel. I mean, 386 subscribers, man. You've been at this for a while, and I just love, I have it up here on my computer. Man, you got a little bit of everything. Like, what got you into this? And then, me, I guess, nerding out on this side of things, like, yeah, you got some really good editing skills too. I'm impressed with that. Like, just talk to me a little bit about your channel and everything. Yeah. So right now, like, growing up, I've always, like, I want to fish for a living. I want to find a way to do that. In college, it kind of seemed like maybe competitive bass fishing was a way to do that. The further I got into it and being pretty good at it, it was kind of discouraging, because really, for the most part, it's not a good way to make a living. But right now, YouTube is a way that some people are doing it. And I do all kinds of crazy fishing stuff, and I feel like there's not a lot of people that are doing what I'm doing at the level I'm doing with as much variety. And I'm like, well, I need to start taking advantage of this, because eventually down the road, in a perfect world, there will be a way for me to keep doing all my crazy adventures, and all I have to do to make that my job is document it. And that's what YouTube offers the opportunity to do. And so that's really my big picture goal. It is really fun. Like, I love editing videos and going back through and kind of reliving those fish catches. And, like, once it's a video, it's there. Realistically, it's there forever. So I'll always be able to go back to it, and that's super cool. But yeah, I like teaching people and helping people out with fishing. And me, as a YouTube viewer, I watch a lot of YouTube. The most interesting videos are the ones that have great fishing, but also I can learn from it. There's stuff that's being explained. For me, since I fish so much, a lot of times I can watch and just infer and be able to gather this information without it being explained to me. But I know I'm kind of crazy, and that's not how most people operate. Cool.
So I really like, it's even hard for me to like, I would have such a hard time posting a video and not explaining what's going on because there's so much that is valuable information that you can't just pick up and understand from watching the video that, it needs to be explained. And so, yeah, being able to voice over stuff and explain what's going on during the video is really neat to me.
And that's good. Even sometimes the simplest thing, that's what's amazing. Like when you were talking earlier about mentality, sometimes it's even a very simple concept that's so profound. If not said, to your point, if not said, you don't think about it.
What software do you use to edit with? Just a
I
nerd
have
question.
Final Cut Pro.
Okay.
That's what I use. And my stuff's all just on a GoPro. Eventually down the road, if I do end up taking it seriously, if things travel in the right direction, which I hope they will, I would, I'll be getting different cameras and having more. But for now, I think the most important part is just that I do film when stuff is happening and that it's captured on film.
Yeah, 100%. You just want to always have the camera rolling because you never know what footage you shoot is the footage that blows things up. Yeah, I mean, congratulations to you on that, and yeah, keep grinding because yeah, your YouTube channel is definitely going to be blowing up here soon. And guys, we're going to link his YouTube channel, his Instagram, his social information, all in the episode description. You can find that on YouTube and on any platform that you listen to your podcast, Spotify and Apple, such as the like. Got anything else for our main man?
Yeah, Nolan, just again, I appreciate you coming on and always willing to share, what's inside your head and just kind of being an advocate for the sport of fishing. And, I think it's, especially being a young guy yourself. I mean, he's young but, a lot of great insight. So appreciate you coming on, and we'll be sure to follow you. What's your next body of water for your kayak?
We go to Santee Cooper at the end of March.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
So that one should be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that one because in Virginia we have big bass, right? Like we have 10-pounders, but they are very few and far between. And the ones that are out there are smart because there's not that many of them. But whenever I get to go somewhere with a chance of catching, like we're a 5-pounder for me in Virginia, a 5-pounder is a big fish. Like I'm pretty stoked on that. When I go to these places where 5-pounders, I'm not going to call them routine because they're not routine really anywhere, but it happens. It's so cool to just be in that environment around fish of that caliber. So, yeah, Santee should be, and I won't have to stare at my screen. My eyes hurt for like 2 days after Toledo Bend because all I did was stare with that live scope. But I don't think I'll have to do that at Santee. I'll be staring through the water at probably giant fish on a bed is probably what's going to happen. I don't know. We'll see. But
good stuff.
That's freaking awesome. Well,
thanks, Nolan.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you again,
good
bud.
luck.
And we'll have you on in the future.
Right? Good luck to you. Thank you.
See you, bud.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Well, there you have it. What an awesome guest. That was fantastic. I mean, and this is what, again, I love about the podcasting thing is you start with, we're going to go down this route. And now we're talking about kayaks. We're talking about this stuff. You just, it's always the secondhand or thirdhand information within the podcast I feel like people can draw from.
A wide range. And again, like we talked about at the beginning, I think a lot of guys, Travis is this way. A lot of us are hybrids when it comes to, again, all things fishing. Like whatever's going to be biting or eating, we're just going after the fish. I mean, and Jeremy mentioned that it's the fish.
Yeah.
Regardless of the species or the watercraft that you're in or how you catch it, the time of year. And I like what he's saying too. I mean, I can relate to that of just variety. Variety is good. To keep just kind of your mind fresh, seeing new scenery, and just switching up. So yeah, another good segment, Thomas.
Yeah, really fantastic. And just before we wrap up here, guys, one thing that I forgot to mention at the beginning is we are going to run a little type of giveaway thing just to kind of help boost up the podcast. So if you could leave a review on Apple or Spotify, once we get up to 10 complete reviews of the podcast, it doesn't have to be just, 10 on one, 10 on the other. It could be 5 on one, 5 on the other. We're going to do a little bit of a giveaway. This just helps really just promote this podcast in the algorithm so more people know that we exist. As long as it's 5 stars, doesn't matter. You can say we're terrible, but just give us 5 stars. That helps a lot. And once we reach that goal, we will be having a little bit of a giveaway from those 10 comments, those 10 reviews. We're going to pick from those randomly to give away a prize. More on that in our next episode. But this is just a little hors d'oeuvre to get you guys prepped and ready. So go hit that comment thing, like and subscribe to us. Yeah,
and let us know what you want to hear. And saying that too, we're hearing your comments. Just
Absolutely.
give us time. We're going to get those folks on that you've thrown out to us, and different people that you'd like to hear, different topics. We're definitely going to pursue that. It's just a matter of time. So
yeah, poor Jared and I get bombarded every day of why aren't we doing this 5 days a week? And it's like, well, I need to make money so I'm not homeless. Maybe one day we'll get there, but we're doing the best we can. We hear you, and we'll get guests on. But we got to do it at the speed that we can handle right now, right?
Yep.
So until next time, from Fishing the DMV, my name is Thomas Aarons.
Jared Mounts.
We'll see you next time. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your hosts, Thomas Aarons and Jared Mounts. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.